I have to say, I only knew Joshua for one day. And that one day was August the 2nd, 2006. And I know the day very well and can remember the date because I mark it from the bombing of Cana in southern Lebanon by the Israeli Air Force. Now, Joshua had come to Derry to speak at an anti-war meeting on the 2nd of August 2006. He wasn't scheduled to speak about Lebanon at all. That wasn't on the posters, and it wasn't what people had come to hear. He was to speak with an Iraqi lawyer, also on the platform, about the case for demanding the withdrawal of foreign troops from Iraq. And he was to describe some of his own experiences there. But since the bombing of Cana had just happened a few days earlier and was on the news every night, with horrific images of, children, babies being carried from the ruins of blasted buildings, like little bleeding bundles of cloth, and other horrific images. So that was in the minds of some of us as well, and it seemed ridiculous not to talk about it. And indeed, Joshua began talking about Lebanon rather than about Iraq, and if you like, intersected with the thinking of the people, about 80 people in the room at the time. So the discussion had as its focus not Iraq at all, which is what we had come to discuss, but the bombing of Cana. And we suspected, or some of us suspected immediately, that bombs made by the arms company Raytheon had been used in the attack upon Cana, and particularly we suspected that a Raytheon bomb had been responsible for, as a bunker buster, as we call them, guided bomb units, GBUs, that come right down through a 6-story block of apartments, of flats, exploded in the basement. And the basement was packed by members of 2 families who had gone there for shelter. And they weren't just blown to bits, men, women and children. Mostly women and children, because they were there for shelter, and it's where they had fled to. So it seemed ridiculous for us to discuss Iraq and not to focus on that, particularly since the company we suspected of supplying the bomb, Raytheon, had a branch office, if you like, a technology plant just in the outskirts of Derry. And we have been campaigning against the Raytheon Arms company in Derry for a few years, but now there was a specific instance which had aroused the anger of all of us, and we knew that Raytheon was the sole supplier of guided bomb units, of bunker busters, to the Israeli Defence Forces. So the discussion turned to that, and what can we do about it? Here was this just 2 miles from where the room was. Here was a branch of Raytheon. We began to talk about direct action against Raytheon. There was a bit of a discussion about, everybody agreed it should be non-violent, but there was disagreements about what that meant. Was damage to property, violence, etc., etc. In the end, it was decided that a few days later, 6th of August 2006, that we would go. At least I think it was the 6th. It was a few days after Joshua's meeting. We would go, and to our surprise, we were able to get into the Raytheon company. We did this by the subtle strategy of all running at the door as soon as somebody opened it. We found ourselves inside, ran up the stairs, got into the main office where all the computers were. Nobody really tried to stop us, and we were in there. There were 2 or 3 workers there. We asked them to leave. We did. We barricaded the doors. And to cut a long story short, we were in there. It created something of a sensation in Northern Ireland, because this being Northern Ireland, the news media thought that there was going to be an armed standoff, that there was going to be a gun battle around Raytheon, which of course there wasn't. We had no arms at all. It hadn't occurred to us. But we were arrested, we were charged, we went to court, and that created, and we finally went to trial, and we were acquitted, sort of on the grounds that we hadn't committed any crime. Remember, sort of, we began the case by saying that we were in the position that a person would be in, if they're walking along the street, they heard the sound of a child being brutalised in a house. if they kicked the door in, ran forward and hit the person who was savaging a child, would that person, to stop the assault, would that person be guilty of breaking and entering, burglary, of common assault? We said no, that couldn't be. No such verdict could be given in all reason and in all morality, and indeed in law. And that argument was accepted by the court. We were acquitted. A few months, but Raytheon didn't go away, so we did it all again. And this time it wasn't 9 men, but 9 women who went in and again stopped production in the Raytheon plant. And after that, the Raytheon company wrote to the local council, wrote to its sponsoring body called Invest Northern Ireland, the body which subsidises inward investment. And Raytheon wrote to them and said that clearly the security of their plant and the safety of their workers couldn't be guaranteed in Derry. Something ironic about that, talking about the security of their plant and the safety of their workers, given the business that they're involved in. And they left. As far as I know, I may be wrong about this. I mean, there's arms companies all over the world, and there's people protesting about them. I mean, they've been very successful, non-violent direct actions against military installations and so forth. As far as I'm aware, sort of this was the first time that a major arms company, one of the biggest in the world, had been forced by non-violent direct action and by the support we got in the local area, sort of around a Derry, not support from any of the political parties, but an awful lot of support from people on the streets and people phoning into the local radio programme and so forth. And that forced Raytheon to leave Derry, and we were very pleased about that, obviously. And I think it helped to re-energise some other campaigns, some against Raytheon in Britain, sort of another campaign sort of against the arms trade, which have been going on. So all that started with Joshua's talk in a room above Sandino's pub, as a rock and roll pub in Derry, where people had come along to hear about something else. And the reason we were sparked into action, well, it had to do sort of with what was going on in Cana and the feeling, well, we got to do something about that. But also very much with the way in which people were inspired by what Joshua had to say. Now, he wasn't a rhetorical speaker. He wasn't shouting or anything like that. In fact, it was quite a quiet a talk. But his attention to detail and his clear sort of a commitment and the fact sort of that he was, if you like, consumed with the campaign and the cause of peace and opposing war, that had an enormous effect on people. And the fact that he was putting it all in an international, in a global context and in the context of a global morality, I think that inspired people. And I mean, I've no doubt at all that had Joshua not been there, had he not spoken in the way that he did, had he not had the reaction in the room that he did, then we'd never have gone into Raytheon. So when I look back on it, and I say my acquaintanceship with him was, I mean, very brief. He wasn't there because a few days later, he was doing a tour of Ireland, speaking at various centres. So, I mean, he wasn't there at the time we actually went in to Raytheon or at the point where we were acquitted by the court. But we had maintained contact with him. I was in email contact with him 2 or 3 times afterwards. And what I can say with certainty, and it's not sentimentalising or anything or personalising it, I know that we all go around at times in our campaigns, and sometimes we almost wonder, am I making any difference? And we're told a lot of the time, you're making no difference. This won't work. The forces against you are far too strong. And I very much hope that Joshua knew, I hope that he knew what a huge difference he made here in the town which he only visited for one overnight, just to speak at a single meeting. And 80 people is big for our anti-war movement, I can tell you at the time, but it's not a huge meeting. It's not a big rally. There were no important people there, no city councillors, no members of parliament, no people like that there. Ordinary socialists, Christians, trade unionists, very mixed anarchists, very mixed gathering, Irish Republicans, and so forth. Very mixed gathering, but come together and found a focus sort of when Joshua was speaking and in terms of what he was saying. Sort of that big difference it wouldn't have happened without we have got a town which is free of the arms trade now. Joshua played an absolutely key role in that, probably without knowing. As I say, I hope he realised afterwards what a difference he had made. And that's all we can do, isn't it, as we go around. Whatever our background, whatever our particular ideology, we're fighting against war in the arms trade. All we can hope to do is to make a difference, it seems to me. That's what fuels our determination to keep on doing it. Joshua certainly made a huge difference in Derry.